So we're going to talk about the distinction here between what I'm calling, and these are somewhat terms that I'm sort of created for this purpose, though the root meaning of these things is consistent. So we're going to talk about intra-textual interpretation and inter-textual interpretation, because this distinction is going to be important as you're writing your essays. We've talked about it before on other things. I've used different language, but I'm trying to provide some framework here and some language that makes it easier for us to refer to those two different things. So the basic premise here is that intra-textual interpretation is interpretation that focuses on interpreting events and meaning within the context of the text. What do I mean by that? I give an example below. So if I were to make a statement and do some intra-textual interpretation for Manny and A's relationship, it would look something like Manny, I'm combining the names. May and Annie's relationship becomes strained, partly because May's success in the company makes Annie jealous. So that's interpreting what's going on in the book. It's saying this is the motivation for these characters. And it is interpretation. You're doing some sort of reading between the lines. It's not 100% sort of factual information presented in the text, but it is referring to and making interpretations within the text. And to help you get a sense of these terms, I've also provided a little bit of help here with the roots at the beginning. So that's what this paragraph is. So the root intra, which means within. So when you see intra, you know it's within. That will help you remember that we're talking about within the text. And to give you a sense of what that term, how that word is used in other contexts, we can look at a word like intramural. I'm hoping many people heard that word before, have used it. No? Okay. So intramural literally means within the walls. We see within, and then mural is a word for wall in the roots. So sometimes we see if someone has painted something, this huge painting on the side of a building or something like that, that's called a mural. It's literally calling it a wall, but it's because it's taking up the entire wall there. So intramural sports are sports that are generally played within your town or within your school. So if you play intramural sports, like I remember I played intramural soccer when I was 5 years old. So I was on a team, I forget the color, maybe it was the blue team, and then on Saturdays I'd sometimes play the red team or the yellow team, and all those other teams were from my town. It was intramural. It was within the walls of that town. And a lot of times schools have their own intramural sports systems where you play people from that thing. So intra is within. And intra-textual is you're making points within the text. Any questions on that? Yeah, all right. So now let's look at inter. And here I'm going to go and I'm going to start with this piece where we're going to just try to remember the distinction, and then we'll really look at the how the distinction is going to work for our own interpretations. But let's look at the distinction in terms of the actual roots here. Inter, which means between. And I'm pretty sure that everyone here has heard the term interstate, right? Interstate, literally using the terms, means between states. And then I give you the example here, an interstate highway is one where you can drive between two different states, two or more states. So for instance, Interstate 95 or I-95, as might be referred to on the traffic report on the radio, is a highway where you can go from Massachusetts to Rhode Island to Connecticut, and you can actually go all the way down to Florida on the interstate highway along the East Coast. It's an interstate. It's between many states, right? I suppose there could be an intrastate highway, but that would only take you to within your own state. So maybe a circle in the middle of Massachusetts, that could be an intrastate highway, though I've never heard of that being called that before. So it takes you within the actual state, inter. Also, we know if you inter somebody, you're putting them within, actually, no, that's a different root. Forget I said that. Inter comes from the root terra, which is the Latin root for earth. So when you inter someone, you're putting someone in the earth. So different there. So what are we talking about when we talk about inter-textual interpretation? It's interpretation that focuses on interpreting a text in a way that derives meaning that is applicable outside of a given text. So this is, you're not making a point about how the text works or what the conclusion is in the book or what happens to the characters or why the characters act in a certain way. Now you're trying to derive meaning outside of the text from what's happening in the text. So I give you the example here. Intertextual interpretation, an example of that same idea of May and Annie. So I say, through its depiction of May and Annie's relationship, so through this, the novel is suggesting that jealousy, especially in a highly competitive workplace, can hurt even the strongest relationships or the strongest friendships. This is intertextual in the sense that it's saying, okay, what does the text mean? What meaning can I derive from that applies outside of the text? So it's suggesting not only that jealousy is the cause of this intra-textual interpretation, but it's also suggesting that friendships can be strained through jealousy. So in general, friendships can be strained by jealousy, especially if people are working in the same workplace. The workplace is highly competitive. And I think part of it, something that's not here, but that's in the novel, part of it also has to do with the fact that Annie is the one that got me the job. So she started off there. If they started in as equals, maybe it would be a little bit different. But because they started as unequal, as one being much higher and the other one sort of supersedes that where some of the jealousy, and that's where the friendship can come from. I mean, some of the strain on the friendship can come from. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about intertextual, going across it. Okay. Questions on that basic piece? Because now we're going to transition to how this works in the specific thing.